Hi, peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and author of 4 baking books, including Salty, Cheesy, Herby, Crispy, Snackable Bakes. On each episode, I hang out with the sweetest bakers around and take a deep dive into their signature bakes. I'm so excited to welcome back David Lebovitz to the show. You probably know David as a pastry chef, cookbook author, and American in Paris, who has inspired home bakers around the world with his books, blog, and now his must-read Substack. He's one of the OG food bloggers, and readers have long loved his recipes, humor, and candid glimpses into Parisian life. David is here to chat about his new book, the newly revised Ready for Dessert, My Best Recipes. It's his best-selling collection with more than 170 recipes for cakes, cookies, pastries, and more, all accompanied by gorgeous photography. One recipe in particular that we dive into is his Linzertorte, a cross between a tart and a cake, which he reimagined with a peanut butter and jelly twist. Traditionally, this Austrian classic is made with a hazelnut crust and raspberry jam filling, but in David's version, he swaps in peanuts and grape jelly. We dig into the recipe and the differences between the traditional version and his version. We talk about the first chocolate soufflé David ever made in his mom's Pyrex measuring cup, no less, his take on lemon dessert people versus chocolate dessert people, the origin stories of both galettes and ganache, and so much more. I always adore chatting with David, and I can't wait for you to hear our conversation. You can find today's recipe at Cherry Bomb Substack. Today's episode is presented by California Prunes. If you're a longtime listener, you know I'm a longtime fan of California Prunes. They're good for your bones, your gut, and even your heart. But most importantly, they're just a good snack, and I love a good snack. They're in my cabinet right now because they satisfy my sweet tooth at a moment's notice. Of course, I also love baking with them. They have such a complex flavor that gets even deeper when paired with chocolate or warm spices or nuts. Some of my favorite recipes are my famously delicious cream scones with chopped prunes, my sticky toffee pudding with prunes, and I've even added prunes to my chocolate banana bread. Each recipe has 100% been better for it. But if you don't believe me, you can try all of these recipes for yourself at my website, jessiesheehanbakes.com. My big tip is that anything you'd bake with dried fruit, from oatmeal cookies to granola, scones, and muffins, is a prune moment. You can use them whole because they're so nice and juicy, or chop them up to spread the joy. They also help you hit some of your health goals, and if I can do that with a cookie, I'm happy. Prunes contain dietary fiber and other nutrients to support good gut health, potassium to support heart health, and vitamin K, copper, and antioxidants to support healthy bones. There's a reason they've been on grocery store shelves since the 1800s. For more recipes and info, check out the California Prunes website at californiaprunes.org. That's californiaprunes.org. Peeps, guess who was on the cover of Cherry Bomb's Italy issue? It's Chef Missy Robbins of Lilia, Missy, and Missy Pasta in New York City, and Chef Nancy Silverton of Osteria Mozza, Chi Spacca, and more in Los Angeles. Yes, we have 2 covers. We couldn't be more excited to have these 2 iconic chefs grace the cover. Their careers have focused on bringing the best of Italian cooking to the U.S. The entire issue is about La Dolce Vita, with delicious recipes, beautiful photography, and stories that will transport you straight to the trattorias, bakeries, and gelato stands. The Italy issue is out now. Head to cherrybomb.com or click the link in our show notes to order your copy. Let's chat with today's guest. David, so excited to have you on She's My Cherry Pie again and to talk Linzertortes with you and so much more.
I loved talking to you last time, and I'm super excited to be chatting with you again, Jessie.
So I read in your fantastic new book, Ready for Dessert, which is a revised edition of your earlier book, that your baking career began with a chocolate soufflé assembled in a Pyrex measuring cup. And I know that you and I discussed this soufflé last time we spoke, but it's such a good story that it needs revisiting, in my opinion. So I think this was like maybe the first night that your parents left you home alone without a babysitter?
Yeah, because I was old. I should add, I was old enough. It wasn't like they just left me alone. But I was, they used to leave us with TV dinners, and probably some of the listeners might not even know what that is, but just it was like a rectangular tray that was divided and had like the dessert, the sides, the roast turkey or fried chicken. And, you put it in the oven for 30 minutes and it was dinner. It was a 5-course dinner.
Can I just say that my mother didn't buy them and I coveted them, David? I wanted everything. The equivalent of a bento box. Like I wanted lots of different compartments.
That's actually a great analogy. It was like the American bento box.
Yes.
But my mother left me, she was leaving me alone, and I was old enough to use the stove and the oven. And I noticed, I was looking through her settlement cookbook, which was subtitled The Way to a Man's Heart, which would not fly today as a cookbook title, I think. But it had a chocolate souffle recipe, and it sounded really good. It was chocolate, butter, sugar, and eggs. And of course, we had all those things on hand, except for the souffle dish. So we did have a big Pyrex measuring cup, or it was a medium one, I should say. So I thought, it's oven proof, and it's sort of like a souffle. So I made a souffle, and it came out really good. Souffles aren't hard to make, but it was kind of I was like, wow, what an aha moment for me.
Well, can I just say that is like, if you're going to talk about sort of the magic or alchemy of baking, like there is nothing like a souffle to really turn you into a convert to like the magic.
Well, also, even if they don't, like a lot of times people see pictures of things, especially in magazines with food stylists who know what they're doing. And they have these towering souffles that are like 5 inches above the rim and, going around, it's beautiful. And those are the product of somebody who maybe adds something to the recipe to make it stand up under the camera or something. And a souffle isn't supposed to be a picture perfect thing unless you're like a professional and you're getting paid, So at home cooks can relax, and it's, you can make a souffle in a gratin dish. Actually, I like those a lot because then you have a lot of crust. And I know you're someone that really likes texture and crust. So you're shaking your head.
I am. I'm saying yes, because
too.
That's what's lovely about a souffle is the contrast from the foamy, delicious, chocolatey softness and then the crispiness. Did kind of the souffle put you on like a little bit of a baking and cooking jag? Like, was that like, hey, I can do this. This is fun.
I was never a baker. I wasn't my calling to be a baker. And, fast forward to when I started working in restaurants in New York, and then I moved to San Francisco and started working at Chez Panisse. When I worked in the cafe, I was a line cook. I worked at Zuni as a line cook, savory. And so I know how to defend myself. It's like I'm actually tougher than I look or sound. But I used to love watching the bakers bake. I loved watching them peel fruit. I loved watching them roll out dough. And I thought it was really fun. What was funny when there was an opening at Chez Panisse for a baker. So I said I wanted to do it. And it was between me and this woman who I worked with. And of course they gave it to her. I don't know why. No. I mean, she was a friend. So I was like, oh, congratulations, great. And then she got offered a job right after that, like soon after, running the kitchen at a fancy hotel in San Francisco with benefit, the whole union stuff. So she left. I was like, oh, that's too bad. So I got the job. I was the second choice. I was there I stayed for 13 years, and I'm part of the Chez Panisse family.
Yes.
And
I want to just jump back a little bit to more delicious things that I read about you as a little kid or a younger person. I know there were not a lot of sweets when you were growing up, but I know you sat around with your grandfather, ate pistachio nuts, drank little sips of whiskey. I love those early food. I know. Sorry, listeners. It's true.
Wow.
Or he gave you a little.
Left alone. My grandfather gave me whiskey.
If you're just joining, poor David. But one treat that your parents did have on hand were these store-bought pecan shortbread cookies, yes?
Yeah.
And was that Keebler's, like the yellow?
They were called pecan sandies.
Yes, but do you remember if it was the Keebler's in the yellow container?
I think so.
Yeah, because the way you described them, kind of thick and nubby. They
were dry,
yes.
But I don't know if you ever had them.
I did.
Okay. I mean, nowadays you couldn't. I don't even know if they make them, because then when you say a dry cookie, people are like, moist. And I say, I mean, moist. It's got to be soft and chewy and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I think they must have had artificial butterscotch. They must have had something in them that made, or, umami, MSG, or something that made you want to eat these cookies as a kid. Usually kids want chocolate chip cookies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
No,
those pecan sandies are,
so good. I remember my mother would only buy Chips Ahoy, which is like really gives chocolate chip cookies a bad name. They're not
yeah.
good. And I
But
would
you
have,
ate them.
I did, but I would have much rather had a pecan sandy.
Okay, you might remember. Okay.
Yeah.
There were these cookies and they were like bars called Heydays. And it was
Yes.
like a rectangle of caramel that was like gooey, covered with chocolate and big chunks of peanuts. And it
Yum.
was almost like a candy bar.
Yeah.
They're like not cookies, they're candies. And
Yeah.
I
Yum.
never I go to the US, I go and look. It's like they still make Heydays.
We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. It's Carrie Diamond. I'm the founder of Cherry Bomb and the host of Radio Cherry Bomb. In case you hadn't heard, Cherry Bomb is on Substack. If you're a Substack lover like me, be sure to check it out and subscribe. You can subscribe for free or become a monthly or annual paid subscriber. Each Saturday, we post a recap of She's My Cherry Pie, plus all the fun baking news of the week. We also have recipes, the Cherry Bomb Friday newsletter, and special features from Cherry Bomb's print magazine, like the Missy Robbins cover story from our Italy issue. If you're new to Substack, think about it as the home of modern blogs. If you love reading, writing, recipes, it's the place for you. Visit cherrybomb.substack.com.
Now back to our guest. There was one cake that your mom did make that made it into the book, yes? The date nut torte.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that cake? And that was, do you think she liked it? I know your mom was sort of like, we talked about this last time, into diet culture. Like, she was not going to be making tons of sweets. You mentioned about that cake that it doesn't call for butter. It's dusted with 10X or confectioner sugar. Is the recipe in the book? This is what I wanted to know.
Yes.
Is it hers?
Yes. My mother actually liked sweets. She used to go to, we had in our town, there was actually a store that made candy and chocolates, and you could watch them dip. This is New England, and you could watch, it was called Hilliard's, and you can watch them dip stuff, and they made, gumdrop, they made everything there, gumdrops. So my mother she liked butter crunch toffee and things like that. But, there was that era where women, were very concerned about their diets. So she was kind of under that period of time where it was important.
Just so people have a visual on David's mother, you describe her as looking like Mary Tyler Moore, which is like the best way. I love Mary Tyler Moore.
The only problem is if I watch Ordinary People, that's exactly what my mother looked like. But it's also, the woman is terrifying.
Yes.
She's like the terrifying mother.
The terrifying version.
Yeah, so my mother wasn't terrifying. But so this cake she made was a date nut torte. It's very simple because her father was Syrian. But he came over during that time in America where people who moved to America didn't want to be Syrian American. They wanted to be American. They didn't talk about it much, and they weren't pining to go back to the old country. But she made this cake that had Syrian influences, using dates and then topping it with powdered sugar. And it was delicious. And so I put it in the first edition of the book. And when I revised the book, because when I rewrote Ready for Dessert for the new revised edition, and I think you said revived edition.
Oh, did I?
Which I loved. I'm going to use that because there's so many times, it's only so many times I can say revised.
Right.
I thought, well, I'm sure this cake is going to be better with butter. And I made it, and Romain didn't like it. And my partner's French, and he will tell you, French people will tell you they don't like something. So in that respect, he's a very good taste tester. And he was right. It's actually, everything doesn't have to have butter in it. Everything doesn't have to be over the top rich. And it's a snack cake. I know you're into snack cakes as well. In their cakes, you don't feel, and I hate to use this word, guilty, because I can't tell you what I've eaten already today in terms of chocolate and cookies and so forth. And somebody brought me some Milanos from America. The bag is next, and I'm dying to open them. But this cake is really nice because the dates add a nice little burst of gooey sweetness. I add often green anise seed, just a little bit. But I add sort of an elusive, beguiling flavor that's it's something you want to eat with like coffee or just, you slice off a little bit of it. So I love that cake.
Sounds so delish. So we're not going to go too deep into Japanese times because we did so last time, but I did want to talk about Lindsay Shear because she, you've said you learn most of what you know about baking from her. And there were a couple of great things that I read about her in some of the headnotes in the new book. You think she gave you one of the best, baking lessons ever. she taught you the importance of flavor over technique.
Mhm.
I think we know what that means, but can you just unpack that lesson?
I remember at Chez Panisse, I'd worked there quite a while for several years, and I was used to making all these fruit tarts with all this amazing, we got the most amazing ingredients at Chez Panisse, organic butter before anyone heard of organic butter, and just eggs from the farm. So everything was amazing. But I said to Lindsay once, I said, I don't know how to make any of those fancy desserts. And she said to me, well, that's okay, because most of them aren't very good anyways. And so I did go to pastry school in France to learn how to make these fancy cakes that were like, layers of like gelatin and fruit and, cake, sponge cake, and syrup and everything. But I really learned to taste food. I always tell people I'm an ingredient-based baker, not a technique-based baker. People want me to do demonstrations. They think I'm going to teach people something. And I can teach, I'm not an idiot. My desserts are very simple. My style's very simple. I'm really into taste and flavor. And that's something that's kind of, no one wants to listen to me for 3 hours at a class talking about like, this is the right peach and this is what to do with it. And I can talk for 5 or 6 hours on that. But that's something that's very interesting about me. And when I write a book, I'm so flavor driven. And Roman, my partner, thinks I'm insane because I'm like, taste these 7 cakes I made. And he's like, they all taste the same. I'm like, well, this one has like 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder. It's a little denser than the one with 1 teaspoon of it. And you're shaking your head. But to me, I can taste all those things. And I don't know if other people can as well. But when people ask me, can I do this with your recipe? Can I change this? I'm like, I worked really hard on getting it to just the right point where I think you're going to like it. So yes, you can change it, but I gave you the best recipe.
I want to talk about your move to Paris, but I wanted to talk about it within the lens of like your irreverent humor and your observation. I read or listened, I'm not sure which, that part of what you think, or when somebody will ask you about your sense of humor, that there is something about being a really amazing observer. If you're an observant person, it's almost like you have these incredible stories to tell, particularly for you, about what it's like to live in Paris, and that there is some connection. Part of what makes your writing so entertaining is your sense of humor. But I also liked this idea of this connection between being really observant and telling those stories through this funny lens. Did that sort of just happen organically when you began writing for the blog? Because I know I read that you got a D in high school English. It's not like we're looking at. Sorry, David, I didn't mean to out you.
I've been on the New York Times bestseller.
Right, exactly. So you're fine. You're fine.
I think part of it was I'd worked in restaurants most of my life, so I was used to being very open about everything. I don't want to scare your readers, but when I remember working in restaurants, you'd walk in and go, "Oh, I have a rash between my legs." Can someone take a look at this? You go in the, it's like, "Oh, that's this," and you're just used to talking about stuff. And I'm also a pretty honest and open person in some ways, but I'm also very introverted. And when I moved to Paris, there were so many interesting things. Still to this day, I can take a walk to the bakery and there's like 5 stories in there. I have so many stories in my head that are ready to tell. It's just so interesting here. And it's so different. Somebody once said, Americans and French people are like 2 of the most complete opposites of each other. And a lot of Americans are like, oh, and we want to move to France. And, French people are like, we want to move to America, the energy, blah, blah, blah. People say that, but they don't really want to because those people believe that their country is still better. Their way of life is still better. And that might have shifted in the last few years. But you really, living abroad is really hard. I think it's okay to talk about that. I used to have people, write to me or leave comments saying, how can you talk like that? And you should be happy that you're there and so forth. I used to have French people come up to me and go, oh, we're so glad somebody's talking about France honestly, rather than just, every day we have croissant and everything. It's like, no, the other day I had to go to the bank. Oh my God.
Now I want to jump into your amazing book. This is a book that originally came out in 2010, so it's like 15 years later. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about the differences? I mean, I know a couple, you put in some new recipes, et cetera, but what would you say makes this book different?
Well, when 10 Speed Press, my wonderful publisher, I'm one of the authors that loves their publisher, and my editors, if they're listening, even if they're not, I love them. I love everybody at my publisher. They approached me about redoing the book, and I was like, oh, well, I'll just add a few more recipes. it's going to take me a couple days or, call it a day. And then I started looking at the book and going, oh, well, this isn't how I do this anymore. Oh, here's an easier way to do this. And then I thought also, my books are also, I'm telling a story about my life. I'm a memoirist in a way. People don't, if you want a brownie recipe, you can go online and get one. So I want to tell people why they should make this brownie, how it relates to my life, what makes it special, and so forth. But I decided I would use this opportunity. So I started rewriting the book from the ground up. And it was a great chance for me to kind of reboot, or as you say, revive these wonderful recipes that I've had and I've been making for 25, 30 years that I've been, testing and, just making over and over, and how I change them. And they tell the story of my life today. And I was particularly excited because the first cover, as writing books, the cover, you have to have a meeting with the publisher, and then there's the marketing people, and they all want to have their say. Luckily, I love my publisher, and we had several discussions about different covers, and nobody got it. It wasn't quite right. And the designer, Betsy at 10 Speed Press, who's amazing, she wasn't feeling well. And she goes, okay, well, why don't you go? I'm going to work on the cover and I'll be back. The next day she sent this cover, the current cover, to me. And I was like, perfect. It's like, whatever you're taking for your cold, keep taking. But it just said everything about life. It's, I like profiteroles in a Paris cafe. I like chocolate. I like ice cream. I look happy.
It's such I love the cover, David. So good.
And I wanted to be, I was like, I kind of need to be on the cover, but there's so many people who are better looking than me on book covers now that it's like, well, people don't need to see, they just need the idea of me.
Some hands, a chest. That's it.
Yeah. Well, not a chest.
Yeah. Well,
I just
the
saw
upper body.
Daddy cookbook.
Yeah.
And the
David's
naked
just in an apron
Yeah, I'm wearing a sweater. It's cold. I'm at a bistro, not the gym.
I love the cover. One thing I read that I thought was interesting about the new book, you played with the idea of reducing the amount of fat and sugar in every recipe to the least amount that you could do without sacrificing flavor and texture. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, because I'm a kind of an insane recipe tester, and I will test everything every which way. I did go through the low fat. I'm old enough to remember the low fat phase in America when fat was considered bad. And, it's okay to eat fat, but I don't think you need, this whole thing like, fat is life. We need to dude, let's, eat. We're eating pure lamb fat, cold off, well, some people like that. So I'm not afraid of fat, and I'm not afraid of chocolate or eggs or butter. But I think, use these things judiciously. I'm conscious, too, because people, give me, I see recipes that are like, make this buttercream for the cake. And there's like 2 pounds of butter. Like, put 2 pounds of butter in the mixer, add, 8 cups of sugar. And I'm like, that's kind of overkill for me. So I just try to use the minimum amount of things that will still produce a spectacular flavor without overdoing it.
And did you find that in previous recipes, you could look back and be like, oh, actually, I could cut that butter by a few tablespoons and I'm going to use a little bit less sugar? Or was it more in the new recipes that you created for the book, or a mixture?
Honestly, I would. Okay. Can we turn the mic off?
Yeah.
No, honestly, I was like, oh my God, I've got to redo this recipe. That's too much, or that won't work. And it needs, so I would remake some recipes like 4 or 5 times. Yep. And I was like, oh, actually, the version that is in the book is actually really good.
Yeah.
But it took me going through the recipes again to
know that.
Recipes to know that.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
I want everyone to buy David's book. I want everyone to bake from it, but I also really want people to read the head notes. It's like its own book for me. So first, I adore Claudia Fleming. She's a friend. She's been on the podcast. I loved learning that you gush over Claudia and her gingerbread stout. Well, you have a gingerbread stout Guinness cupcake situation that's sort of inspired by her.
Well, when her book first came out, The Last Course, it was kind of a moment in pastry cookbooks, and she was kind of the star. She still is the star. There was a moment, and then the book somehow went out of print. Everyone's like, I just found a copy for $1,000. But I remember I had gone to New York. I was with probably Alice and Lindsay and a bunch. We were cooking for Meals on Wheels, I think, and we had dinner or lunch at
Gramercy.
where she was working.
Gramercy, yep.
I was like, oh my God, it's Claudia Fleming, And I was sitting, these other, I think I was with like all these celebrity, or now they call them celebrity chef, but these are people who are like Wolfgang Puck was probably with us, and as Claudia Fleming. And she, Claudia's she was a trained dancer, I think. She's very poised and measured in a way too. So she's not someone you're going to, hang out. Hey, Claudia.
She's not going to be like jumping up at the side of the table like, David.
Exactly. So I think she might have been a little scared of me. But then I met her we were on like Food Network. We were like judges, and Claudia Fleming walks into the green room. And I'm like, I can't breathe.
I love that.
And she's super nice.
She is. She's so lovely.
Yeah.
The other thing I loved learning about was the, quote unquote, possible invention of the galette. Tell us about Jacques Pepin coming to Chez Panisse and the apple crunch tart.
Yes, we had a French chef, Jean-Pierre Moulet, at Chez Panisse for quite a while, who I loved, and he was friends with Jacques Pepin, and so he invited Jacques Pepin to come and cook with us for a week. And Jacques Pepin, he's not really a restaurant cook per se, but he came in and he was, kind of walking around and spending time with us in the pastry department. He had these 2 books on technique come out, and I forgot the name, but of all the cookbooks I've had to get rid of in my life, those 2 technique books are amazing. And he had these like desserts. One of them was he carved a swan basket out of a watermelon, which was not very Chez Panisse, but he was doing it in front of us. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. But he made these apple crunch tarts that were like a layer of dough, apples, and then a layer of dough on top, enclosed, buttered heavily with sugar on top, and you bake it, and the whole top became crunchy. And I was like, oh my God, these are so good. It's called apple crunch tart. And somehow, he left after the week. Somehow we decided to make them without the top. And I don't know, we called them galettes. It sort of stuck. Now everybody's making galettes. I saw there's a cookbook of galettes recently. It came out, looks really good. But living in France, nobody calls them galettes. They're tarts, apple tart, tarte aux pommes. Like if you say galette, a galette is a buckwheat crepe.
Right. Oh, that is so, I love that story. And there's another story that I also loved, equally, where does this word come from kind of story. Tell us about the ganache origin story.
Oh, yeah.
I love this one.
Yeah, the word ganache allegedly came because a young stagiaire or intern, he was melting chocolate and he spilled some cream into it. And the chef called him a ganache, which means stupid. I think it also can refer to a pillow. I called him an idiot. But then they stirred it up and it came out really good. So that's allegedly how ganache got started. When I wrote Drinking French, I was writing about chartreuse, the French liqueur, and I sent the chapter to the head of chartreuse in France and the Alps to just fact check. And he wrote me, he goes, well, nobody was around 600 years ago to verify some of these things, because I did research, but there's stories out there. But I like stories.
You have this, I think, kind of hilarious but potentially polarizing take on 2 dessert camps, 2 kinds of people, the lemon people and the chocolate people. Can you just tell us a little bit about lemon people and chocolate people?
Yes. I used to teach classes at like Sur La Table stores, like 3-hour demonstration classes, and people would come in, you'd make 5 or 6 desserts. And, you're sort of, these are lay people, I guess you would say. They're not, some are home bakers. Some people just wanted to have something to eat, whatever reason. So you get a really interesting mix of people. Accountants would come in after work and so forth and hang out and eat dessert and drink wine, and it's fun. But I kind of, I was getting, this is before blogging, I'd get all this feedback from people, and people, they're the lemon, they realize like the world is divided into lemon people and chocolate people. And one day I mentioned that in class. This woman like raised her hand and I said, you're one of those lemon people. She kind of looked a little insulted, like I had insulted her. And for years it was like, oh my God, I have to go to therapy for this. Or I've insulted this woman, the lemon. So I called her the lemon lady. And I wrote a story about her once. And if she's listening, I like lemons. I like lemon people. But it is interesting. A lot of people, you've probably met people that are like, I don't like chocolate. Like, what? Wait, what? I can understand not liking coconut or licorice or ginger or whatever, but chocolate, like, no.
Yeah.
And lemon too, like lemon. I love lemon desserts. I don't like them together, chocolate and lemon, but
All right, now I want to talk about dun, da, 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 your peanut butter and jelly Linzertorte. And I love the high-low of this. Like a Linzertorte,
yes.
you think sophisticated, but peanut butter and jelly, you think yum and childhood. So I love everything about this. Can you tell us what a Linzertorte is?
A Linzertorte traditionally it's not really a torte or a cake. A torte, I think by definition, and people can leave comments, is a cake that has no flour in it, but just nuts. And I'm not sure how Linzertorte got the name, but it's not really a tart. I guess it could be a tart, but maybe not. But it's made with sort of a shortbread type crust, like a soft crust that's traditionally has hazelnuts in it. And then it has a layer of jam. And I believe it's traditionally raspberry jam. I kept thinking about nuts and jam. And I was like, well, what about, I'm American. What about peanuts? And what about Concord grape jelly? I tried it and it worked really well. I mean, it's basically, it's the Austrian version is like hazelnut and jam, and the American version is peanuts and jam. So I took that recipe, that idea, and then I converted it to my own peanut butter and jelly Linzertorte.
I love that so much. And I'm mad at myself because I had a Linzertorte in not my last book, but the one before. And why didn't I think of peanut butter and jelly, David? That's so brilliant. I love it. I love it.
Well, that's a good thing about bakers. Like we all complement each other. I always tell people like there's no competition. We all love each other.
Yeah.
And we all like what we do. So you came up with something else and then I came up with something else. And
was this a recipe that was in the first book?
yes.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
And you famously have talked about your love of peanut butter and also bringing it to Paris, right? It's not easy to find. Is that still true?
You can get it now. There's actually a place that makes it here. Paris is like in the last 5 years, it's like American. It's not because of Americans. People have the American influence. It's like, absolutely not. These are French people making peanut butter. But with all due respect, homemade peanut butter doesn't taste the same as the stuff in the jar, especially the crunchy, because the stuff in the jar, it's like half smooth with big chunks of peanuts in it. It's not just all peanuts chopped up. So I'm a little particular about peanut butter, so I bring it back. Although, have you tried, it's called everything butter with nuts and seeds. Somebody brought me a jar of it, and I was like, oh, something else to put in my cabinet.
Yeah.
It's got hemp, flax seeds, sesame, chia, pepites, pumpkin seeds, and sunflower seeds. And I wish I was paid to promote it because then they'd send me a case, but I'm not. So I buy it when I go to America at Whole Foods. It's like $12 a jar. It's made in New Zealand.
But you can get it at Whole Foods. I'm going to get some.
It's so good.
Oh,
it's really good.
Yum.
And I hide it from Roman because he doesn't appreciate it. He'll just eat it. I'm like, no, you're not allowed to just eat it.
Yeah, you have to really be like loving every bite of it.
Yeah, so he'll walk in. He's like, "What are you eating?" I'm like, "Nothing." Why? And there's like nut butter,
peanut butter on your face. Lip. All right, so we're going to heat our oven to 350 degrees, and we're going to butter the bottom of a 9-inch springform pan.
Yes.
2 questions: are we not buttering the sides, or are we doing bottom and sides?
Well, I always do the bottom.
Okay.
Because often when you bake things, it shrinks a little.
So the sides are less important. And then is there a brand of springform?
I'm speechless because I had this springform pan that was made by KitchenAid that had a glass bottom, flat. So you never had to take anything off it, or everything just slid off it. I would always recommend them to people. And then they stopped making it for some reason. I know. I'm like, what?
That's brilliant. Not only because it'll slide off, but because you can serve it on that and it looks pretty. And it's not like when you leave the thing that came in the springform pan on its metal bottom, it looks like you couldn't get it off.
Okay, Jessie, I want you to take this idea and market it and come out with your own glass bottom spring. You have my blessing. I just want you to send me one. So no one's allowed to touch my glass bottom springform pan at home. But those are great. That's what I use, but it's hard to tell people to use that because it's hard to get.
And I wondered about if you would ever make this with like just a tart pan with a removable bottom. Is the size?
You could. The problem is, once again, that's a barrier. More people have a springform pan.
I got you.
And a tart pan.
I got you. So that's a recipe choice. I understand.
Yeah.
So in a food processor fitted with the metal blade, we're going to pulse some all-purpose flour. And I read this in the book, but you are now able to sort of find French flours that simulate all-purpose in the United States enough that you can write for both camps.
Yeah, in France they have like 14 kinds of flour. So we have like two in them, white, all-purpose and bread flour.
Yep, totally. And then we're going to add some roasted unsalted peanuts. Are peanuts easy to find because we're seeing them in bars everywhere?
Well, you can find the salted ones in the supermarket, in the apple aisle or the snack aisle.
Yep.
I get them in bulk. I live near several shops that sell nuts and dried fruits in bulk.
Yep.
And when I say bulk, I don't mean American bulk, but like French bulk, which is like a pound.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then it's like, oh, that's a lot.
Right.
You can buy peanuts. I actually buy raw peanuts and toast them myself.
Nice. Yeah.
But I think it's hard to find raw peanuts, but you can get unsalted peanuts. Planters makes them as well.
And then we're going to add some sugar, which is granulated. And then we're going to add some aluminum-free baking powder. Remind us why you like aluminum-free.
My palate is pretty sensitive to metallic tastes. And I actually, if you use too much, if anyone's ever had a scone that tastes tinny, that's because they use a baking powder with aluminum in it. So it's one of those things that will improve your baking, in my opinion. Aluminum-free baking powder. It's very easy to find nowadays.
And we're going to add some cinnamon. I know that the French use cinnamon much less than us. They're not committed to adding it with apples, et cetera, et cetera. Why do you like it here with the peanuts?
I use not that much. I use like a teaspoon. I think it gives a little background spicy flavor without
being cinnamon.
And also in France, like people will say, oh, you're adding cinnamon. It has to be a peanut butter jelly and cinnamon tort. They're very literal.
Yeah.
So I try to do it so you can't really taste the cinnamon, but it's there. It's a background flavor. Yep. It's like salt in a recipe.
Yep.
You can be like, why do you use salt in cakes? It's like
seasoning. It's the seasoning. And is there a brand of cinnamon?
Well, in America, burlap and barrel spices are really good. I love their cardamom. I love everything they make, actually.
Me too.
And I actually bring them back to France. We can get good spices here. There are a couple companies, Shira. There's a store on Rue Sainte Anne, but it's actually easier for me to bring them back from America than to take the metro. And
we're also going to add some salt. And last time we chatted on the pod, you told me some feelings about kosher salt and that you're actually buying salt and grinding your own, but you're never going to write a recipe where you say, now, first things first, grind your salt. But tell us why you prefer, I think, more like a fine sea salt to a kosher salt. Is that correct?
I find kosher salt really salty. When you bake with something, the saltiness doesn't matter that much. But I always tell people, I want you to taste like a little bit of flaky fleur de sel or Maldon salt, and then taste some white granulated salt.
Yeah.
And you will never use white granulated salt again. So it's okay for baking. As a cook and as a baker, I'm very instinctive. And I know when I stick my fingers in my very clean fingers into the salt bowl, although salt I don't think harbors bacteria. I know exactly when I pull out a pinch or whatever, or if I look in the bowl when I'm making salad, I know exactly how much salt I need. So I tell people use the same salt over and over. In America, kosher salt is very easy to get. That's fine to use that. I use gray sea salt because it tastes more minerally than salty to me.
So we're going to process all of this together until the peanuts are coarsely ground but still slightly chunky. Then we're going to add some chilled unsalted butter. And I had a question. So in France, sort of famously, the butter has more fat, it's more delicious, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is that a problem for you when you're testing recipes? Your recipes don't call for European-style butter, I think. I'm correct in saying that. Do you feel like you would recommend that that's what we all be using anyway? And when you're testing this, I assume you're testing it with the butter you find in France.
Well, I test the recipes here, and then I usually have somebody in America test recipes as well. There is a difference, but I don't think it's that much. Sometimes it's like shortbread. There's a recipe for palais breton in the book, and that high-fat butter, I tell people, it's better to use that. The more water butter has, the more it soaks through, just for your listeners, and it's not as crisp and flaky and crumbly. So I do advise people to use it in certain recipes, but once again, it's a barrier. So
to entry, I get you.
Yeah.
So we're going to add our chilled unsalted butter, cut into half-inch pieces. And I just wondered, when you are cutting butter using a bench scraper, do you use a chef's knife? What's your tool of choice?
I use like these really cheap steak knives that my partner won't get rid of because I can just throw them in the dishwasher.
Right. Love.
Yeah.
And then we're going to continue to pulse our mixture until it resembles coarse cornmeal. Then we're going to add an egg and an egg yolk and process until the dough comes together in a ball. We'll transfer 2/3 of the dough to our prepared pan, and we'll use our hands to press it evenly into the bottom and about 1.5 inches up the side of the pan. Just a shout out for doughs that you can press into a pan. I love them so much. And I think you even say, whether it's this recipe or another one, it may not be quite as even as maybe you could get in a recipe where you rolled. This is a different recipe of yours where you mentioned this, actually. I think it's in your short pastry, the cookie-like pastry dough, where you talk about, when you roll things out, there's this evenness that's very special. But there's nothing like being able to press in a dough.
Well, I'm going to give you another idea for the Jessie Sheehan baking collection.
Yeah.
It's a spray-on tart dough. We spray it in a pan, and it makes dough.
I love it. And that's going to go in my spring form with my glass bottom.
Exactly. No, but it's better to, it's easier to press the dough in than roll it out because it's sticky too.
Yep. Yeah. And if the dough is very sticky, I love this tip. It's such a good one for so many things, but we're going to lightly dampen our hands with water, and that will prevent the dough from sticking to them. We're then going to spread some Concord grape jelly evenly over the dough. Are you making your own? Is this a brand? What's going on with this delicious sounding jelly?
When people roll out the ropes, if they break, it's fine. You just piece them together because they're going to bake in the oven and it's going to be beautiful. We don't get Concord grapes in France, unfortunately. And my partner discovered Concord grape jelly in America. And there's a lot of high fructose corn syrup. And we don't eat something. That's something he eats all the time. He's like crazy for it. So I brought a couple of jars back to France. Concord grape jelly I'm sure you can get, some brands don't have all that other stuff in it. I love the flavor. That's, to me, the flavor of childhood is Concord grape jelly. So I use that.
Yep. Love. Now we're going to lightly flour our work surface. We're going to divide our remaining 1/3 of the dough into 4 pieces, and we'll use our hands to roll each piece into a rope about 14 inches long. This Linzertorte that I mentioned to you earlier that I developed where I didn't do peanut butter and jelly, I think I learned this from Alice Medrick. I just crumbled the rest of the dough on top, which was sort of pretty and fun. But I wondered, I think I don't know Linzertorte recipes well enough. Is that sort of standard, David, that you just roll out with your hands?
Yeah, it's usually like a lattice top.
No, I know it's lattice, but I guess I was thinking it was fussy. But this is really not fussy.
Well, once again, I didn't want people to have to get a rolling pin out because that's sort of a deal breaker for people.
Yep.
And shout out to Alice Medrich, who I love as well.
Yeah. Oh, I see. So if we were looking at a traditional Linzertorte, it actually might encourage us to roll out the bottom crust, and it might encourage us to roll.
Yeah.
I love that. Love that.
One thing that's funny is a lot of times these countries have like a tourism department. They have like the recipe on their website. Be interesting. Like Austria probably has recipes, like things like that.
Yeah. So we're going to roll each piece into a rope about 14 inches long. And if the ropes separate as you're kind of rolling them out with your hands, you can just pinch them back together and continue rolling. It sounds like it's very unfussy dough situation here. We're going to cut each rope in half to form 8 lengths, and then just lay 4 pieces of dough over the top of the tart, equally spaced. Lay the remaining sort of positioned diagonally, equally spaced apart. I mean, it sounds so easy. It's not even a braiding. It's just a laying. I love, love, love. Then we'll pinch off the ends of the ropes where they meet the dough on the sides of the pan. And does this mean we're not really, we don't have to kind of press down to adhere the strips to each other?
Because the dough is very soft and it will melt. It'll soften and make this crust. And it's funny because I do say, you can use any kind of nut you want because some people are allergic to peanuts. Yep. You can use another kind of jam. You can use raspberry, apricot, and so forth.
And we're going to bake until the pastry is a deep golden brown. And I remember the last time we talked about readiness cues, queuing up to the reader about what to look for. And you had said that you can be like sitting watching TV with Roman and say, okay, whatever in the oven right now is ready. But in this instance, what we're really looking for is this deep golden brown color. We're not inserting a toothpick. We're not waiting for a smell. And that's about 40 minutes. We're going to let it cool completely, run a knife around the side, help loosen it from the pan, release the sides of the spring form. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, David. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I love chatting with you.
Yay. That's it for today's show. Thank you to California Prunes for supporting our show. You can find today's recipe at cherrybomb.substack.com. Don't forget to follow She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and tell your pals about us. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. Our producers are Carrie Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking!